We now know the difference between self-care and soul care, but what does it truly look like to walk that out? Let's find out today. Welcome to Rhythms That Restore. I'm your friend Charisse that's ready to journey beside you. Let's learn rhythms that can restore our minds, hearts, bodies, and spirits, and allow us to walk confidently in who God has called us to be. Are you ready? Pull up a chair. Let's get started. Hey everyone, welcome to this Feature Friday, this little bonus episode. I am so thrilled that you are joining us here today because we have been talking all week about what is the difference in self-care and soul care. And today we are not only going to dive deeper into this topic, but we are going to be walking it out with you and giving you some practical steps to truly do that. And so we have so much to talk about. I'm thrilled. But of course, as always, in true Rhythms That Restore fashion, our purpose in being here is always to take a moment to pause, to reset, to recenter, to focus our eyes on what does God's word say? What is God saying? Knowing that his truth is what points us true north, right? And we've talked about throughout this month and throughout this series that we are really wanting to anchor ourselves in God's truth and really anchoring ourselves in the Psalms, because the Psalms are really songs of strength and so many different stories. And so I wanted to point us to Psalm 16, 8 and 9 to just start us out this morning. And again, wherever you're coming from, whether you're listening in the morning or at night, whether we just kind of want to transition and take a moment to just pause and take a deep breath just for a moment so that we can, leave whatever we've been doing already before and whatever is coming after. Just allow us to be present in this moment to truly pour this time in as an investment in you. So take a deep breath in, as deep as you can fill your lungs, and then let it out. And let that exhale breath get everything out, right? Just truly breathing in that oxygen, saying, Lord, I'm here. Lord, I'm listening. What do you have for me? And so Psalm 16, 8 says, I always let the Lord guide me because he is at my right hand. I will not be shaken. Therefore, my heart is glad, and my whole being rejoices. My body also rests securely. This month, we've been talking a lot about delight and that God delights in us. He delights in you as his child. He delights in things that bring you joy, but he also allows us to rest securely in him. And so I just wanted y'all to just be able to process that and to let that truth sink in. Psalm 16, 8 and 9. Well, today, y'all, we have an incredible new friend of mine. The incredible Jess Peeler is going to be here with us. I'm going to share a little bit more about Jess with you guys in just a second. And Jess is going to be really shedding some more light on what it looks like to care for our souls, not only through her story and because of her personal journey, but you guys, Jess is a licensed professional counselor. And so she has got so much education into this area and this arena of life that she's going to be able to share with us. And so Jess and I were kind of talking about what all we can share in our episode today. And I told her I had something that Allison had read over us at the retreat house I thought it would be beautiful to open us up in. And then she's got a great practice to close us out too. And then we're going to sandwich it with so much knowledge to give y'all today. So let's see. I feel like I want to share a little bit about Jess before, and then maybe we'll pop into this welcoming prayer, Jess. So Jess, welcome to the podcast today.
Hey, Charisse, thanks so much for having me. It is such a joy to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
We'll tell everybody a little bit too more about how you and I got to meet a few weeks ago. Let me tell you a little bit about Jess Peeler. Jess is from Jackson, Tennessee. Shout out to any of our Jackson, Tennessee friends. She now lives in Memphis and has lived here for over 7 years with her husband, who they have been married for almost 5 years. Is y'all's anniversary coming up, Jess?
It's in September.
Yay. So fun. 5 years. 5 years. That's a great milestone. Jess is a mental health therapist. She specifically works with women and couples. She's also a personal trainer and a yoga teacher and instructor. Jess is a lover of all things outdoors: camping, gardening, boarding, running, walking. She loves her dog, her fur baby, books, coffee, spending time with her husband, her friends, family, and Jesus. She loves to travel. We're going to talk about that too. Jess, forever student of the mind, body, and soul connection and how to provide healing and connection. One of her favorite ways to express emotion somatically, which we're also going to talk about what is that, is through dancing and singing. And so y'all give a huge welcome to our friend, Jess Peeler. Yay. Jess, thanks for being here.
Thanks, Charisse. It's an honor.
So Jess and I met a few weeks ago, a few weeks ago at the retreat house because they were doing a somatic event. And I was so intrigued. I was like, yes, I don't really know what all of this is, but I want to learn more about how my body can heal through silence, which is why I love the silent retreats. And I didn't really know the connection until that day. And Jess shared her story, and she shared so many tips that I could use myself. And so I messaged her afterwards, like, Jess, you don't even know what a blessing this was that you did this event. I didn't even know what somatic meant. I had just heard it and seen it out and about. And then you shared your story and you shared this connection. And I said, would you please be on? And she so graciously said yes to us.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So let's see, Jess, tell us a little bit about your journey with, first tell us what that is. Because I had alluded to that. What is somatic? You taught that to us at the retreat.
Yeah, it's a great question because it's a word that gets thrown around in a lot of circles now. And so soma really just means body. So soma is the Greek for body, or is relating to the body versus the mind. And so people will say only 20% of life happens from the shoulders up, which is where our brain is, and 80% happens from the shoulders down. Yet most people live in the 20% all the time. And so they don't even know what is happening from the shoulders down in the actual body. And so they're missing out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. 80%?
I know. Isn't that crazy?
Yes. That's to soak that in. Because sometimes we are we think we are so focused on our body, and but it's all, and especially in this culture, understanding that connection that soma just means body.
Yeah, absolutely. And we might talk more on this later, but our society really does set us up to live in that state of staying in the 20% versus dipping into what is the beautiful 80% below. 100%. And so it's pretty foreign to most of us, at least in America, to be able to dip into that and pay attention and attune.
Yeah. Okay. So speaking of the 80% and the 20%, then I think we should read this welcoming prayer over our friends that are listening today to really welcome in all that God has for us, and to be able to start noticing and paying attention to all that He has for us in this entire body and brain and mind. And this is just a beautiful prayer that Allison had read over us. And Jess, you guys might have shared this that day that we did this somatic retreat. But I would love to invite everyone, if you're not driving, Just please
Yes.
keep your eyes open if you're driving. If you're not driving, just kind of give yourself permission to just like pause for a moment and just listen to these words. So if you guys can just like get to somewhere that you can sit for a second, or if you're walking, maybe just stop for a sec, just pause. But listen to these words, because we want what Jess and I were praying for today. We want y'all to hear how much God loves you, how much he delights in you, and how much he created that whole being that is in us. And so we just want to pay attention to what he has for us today. And so this welcome prayer is by Father Thomas Keating, and it says, "Welcome, welcome, welcome. I welcome everything that comes to me today because I know it's for my healing. I welcome all thoughts, feelings, emotions, persons, situations, and conditions. I let go of my desire for power and control. I let go of my desire for affection, esteem, approval, and pleasure. I let go of my desire for survival and security. I let go of my desire to change any situation, condition, person, or myself. I open to the love and presence of God and God's action within me. Amen."
So good.
Right? What a prayer that truly we could all read over ourselves in the morning and again at night, to truly just release the control that we think we have over ourselves.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. So, Jess, I know that really that prayer is a beautiful way to kind of introduce your story of, where you and I both were holding on very tightly to control, to pleasing, to approval, to performing. How did God really start to get your attention in that time of life where you were like, this can't be God delighting in me?
Absolutely. Yeah. And even just to focus in on how that prayer starts of a welcome. I'm going to welcome in the thoughts, the feelings, the sensations, the experiences, all of the things that maybe I have been running from. And in order to let go of my desire for power, control is a big one and still is something I struggle with, needing control. My desire for safety and security, my desire to be approved, to be acknowledged, to be seen as valuable, and to let that go and allow the Lord to work in that. Man, it is such a vulnerable place to be. And in order to do that, it requires a slowing down and tuning in.
Mm-hmm.
And that idea of slower is faster is such a hard concept. Yeah.
Yeah.
It is such a hard concept to even just wrap my mind around still.
Mm-hmm.
Now, granted, I've learned that in my own journey that has become so true. And it's a constant reminder that I have to give myself of, oh yeah, hey, slower's faster here. We don't have to rush through this.
Mm-hmm.
So I love that. I love the prayer. I think it's a beautiful, just even transition into my own story of striving. And really for me, I was running. Like, sure, I was physically running, but also I was running from myself, running from all of the internal messages my body was giving me of like, hey, something's not okay. We're not okay. And I had learned so well through my own coping skills and through my own, what I can say now is just like the only way I knew how to survive. And I praise God for those survival techniques. And I'd gotten to a point where I couldn't keep doing it anymore. My body was literally like flashing red flags at me and trying to get my attention.
Yeah.
And so for me, I was at kind of my breaking point. I had been married for newlyweds. I mean, we'd been married for like 6 months. I was in my degree. I was getting my master's in counseling, and I was in my practicum and internship year. I was still working and trying to hold all of that together. While underneath that, so it looked really pretty from the outside. Newly married, we owned a house, we had this beautiful dog. I was in school to become a therapist, and just it looked really pretty. But meanwhile, I was struggling with an eating disorder. My sleep, I couldn't sleep at all. And I don't know if just for our listeners, like when your sleep is off, your whole nervous system and body, your homeostasis is wrecked. So bless all the new moms out there who are listening. Some of you just cannot help it. And that might mean you need a lot of help right now. I had chronic pain. I was consistently injured. There was just a lot that my body was trying to tell me, and I was not listening. And so for me, it came to a point of where I was starting to have some pretty bad intrusive thoughts about harming myself, and to be completely honest, not really wanting to live anymore. And I had been in and out of therapy for, probably 6 or 7 years. And thank you to the therapists who have walked in this journey with me. They did phenomenal work. And there was something that was still missing. Mm. And so I sought out some help because I knew what was happening. I couldn't do it anymore. And I was sharing with this new therapist that I was sitting with what all I was experiencing somatically, just meaning in my body, and also had chronic anxiety. And I will never forget, she just very gently, very slowly looked at me and said, "Jess, I'm so sorry. Has anyone ever told you that there is a different way? That your body doesn't have to feel like this all the time?" And for me, I just didn't know that there was another way. I did not know that there was another option. And so it was I wouldn't say the beginning of my journey. And it was one of the biggest turning points for me in my own recovery. And so part of the process of my journey has been looking back at my family of origin, which you and I have talked a bit about that, Charisse.
Yeah.
And, I grew up in a family system where financially and physically we were fully supported. Like, we didn't need, I'm doing air quotes, for anything. And emotionally, the rules were you don't talk about them, you don't trust them, and you don't trust others. And so I carried a lot of that with me. And there was a lot of silence in my house, and silence is deafening, if that makes sense. Deafening to the soul specifically. There just wasn't a lot of nurture. There wasn't a lot of curiosity of what was going on in my internal world. And so I got really good at covering it up. I got really good at performing. And when my performance wasn't up to par, then I would berate myself and work harder. And so it's been a long process of rewiring a lot of those, what they call neural pathways in our brain, because this is the beautiful thing about the brain. It is the only, well, I'm pretty sure, if there's a medical doctor listening, just tell me. It is the only organ where you can actually change the pathways. So
isn't that so exciting, right?
Yes, it's incredible. It's incredible. So even though as humans, we develop these automatic and autonomic, which means it just happens, responses to what happens to us or around us, we have the ability to change that. The way I like to use it is like imagining a hiking trail. Of course, I love outdoors. And so if you've ever been hiking, or even like a trail at Shelby Farms, we live in Memphis, so Shelby Farms is a park here. They're really well worn. Like you distinctly know where the trail is. It's usually a dirt path, and people come in and clean it. So when you're creating a new trail, you look at it and it's just covered in brush. Yes, you have the underbrush, which is like the grass, the weeds, the twigs, the roots that you have to get out first. And then you got to clear away the big stuff. And then you have to keep doing it. You have to walk it multiple times for the path to be cemented. The same way in our brain.
Right. And that's, that's why it feels hard at first. And a friend of mine, Ren, that was on a few weeks ago, she always reminds me, it's not hard, Sharice. It's just new. It's not hard. It's just new. And so we are like, that's such a beautiful visual. We're having to move aside the trees. We're having to move aside the underbrush. So it's not hard. And it's not that we can't walk that. It's just a new path that we're creating. And so to remember that and affirm that in ourselves, this is just new. This is just new. And so I love that. Just go back, if we can, just a little bit to the beginning of what your counselor said to you, because I think that resounded with me so much. And I think that does resound with a lot of listeners, but life doesn't have to be that way, because you are so right. When you were thinking, I didn't know there was any other way, because we have been taught, soldier on, pick up your bootstraps and just keep going, or pop some Tylenol. Like, if you have a headache or if your body's hurting, pop some Tylenol, keep on going, more caffeine, just run it out. Because that's what we feel like is expected of us to figure it out. Right. Yeah. And yet our body is like, I'm trying to tell you in every way that I can, if you have a headache or your body is aching or you're not sleeping, that doesn't mean work harder, do more things. That is when I first learned that, I was like, I'm supposed to pay attention to those.
Yes.
That doesn't mean take a different something to numb that out. I had never even thought of that as my body trying to communicate with me.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So what do you like with some of I've never even heard that term, homeostasis. Does that mean sleep?
Homeostasis means a baseline.
Okay.
So coming back to homeostasis would be, the example I like to use is if someone has a fever, they're out of their homeostatic way that their body functions because they're sick and their body's fighting a bacteria. So coming back to homeostasis would be healing the body and coming back to, that 99 or 97.9 or whatever that body temperature is. And so when we're constantly in a state of fight, flight, or freeze, which is usually how the body will function when it's under stress, your nervous system goes into a fight, flight, or freeze response. And so people who experience trauma, anxiety, anything that could activate them and cause a response in their body, your body's either going to try and fight it, you might run away from it, or you might freeze, which is a combination of both. And then there's also a new one that they've started talking about, which is fawn, which is more of a people pleasing. I lose myself and I will just do whatever you want me to do. So I fawn. Wow.
What if you do all the things, Jess?
Most people have some level of each, right? So some people are stronger in one than the other. But I would say probably most people are going to have some kind of like percentage of each.
Wow. How do you even, obviously you would be working with your professional counselor to know, but are there different ways to recognize like one or two words where someone could be like, what am I am? Like how do you recognize you're in, what's the first one? Fight?
Yeah. Fight. So for fighting, like let's use an example. Someone might be feeling, let's say anxious. You got, let's see, what example do I want to use? You got some family members coming over and you're feeling kind of anxious about it. So fighting that might be, we'll use a husband-wife duo. So I'll be the wife, my husband comes in and I'm cleaning and I'm listening to my music, and he comes in and he's wanting to like have a conversation, and I just start fighting with him. Or fight can also look like, so fight can be with words, it can be with actions. It can also be an internal fight with yourself. So internal, like criticism. So that would be fight. Fleeing or running away would be, I'm just not going to think about it. I'm going to leave this situation and I'm getting out of here. Or if it's, for people who are not used to, like, let's say conflict is happening. I'll use me and my husband again. If conflict's happening and I get activated and I just leave the room, that's me fleeing. That's me running away from it. Or if a big emotion comes up in me and it's too uncomfortable for me to touch, I might try to distract myself by running away from it. Not physically running, but if I'm really sad, like sadness is something that I've had to learn to accept and let in because it's been really difficult for me to feel. I will distract and run from it by getting ready for a podcast or or going outside and playing, or something that feels easier to do.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
And then freeze is a little bit more complicated because freeze is actually where the nerve, I like to use the example of you look like you're fine, or some people can look like they're fine, but really I'm a big freezer. So I've had to work on my freeze response because it looks like I'm okay, but really it's as if the gas pedal is being pressed and the brake at the same time. So imagine if you're sitting in a car and you're pressing both, nothing is happening, but combustion is building.
Oh, yeah.
And so I'm too stuck to do anything, but the energy in me is building. And so the way you get out of that is you can't just release the brake, because then you fly into whatever's in front of you.
Right.
And you can't just release the gas, because then you just dead stop. And so it's this very slow, how do we oscillate and slowly begin to take our feet off of each of them so that we can come back to homeostasis. And so it comes back for me particularly, like my story has been a lot of, again, slow. How do we slowly help the body feel safe again? Because my body has felt really afraid for a long time.
Right.
So,
yeah. And those are all emotions that, even just for us to verbalize this right now, I'm sure if anyone else is like me, it's like, ooh, those are things that don't feel fun to actually think about and to recognize or to notice. Like, they kind of can be a little bit yuck. But in order for us to heal that central nervous system and to get to that homeostasis balance, we do need to call them what they are. And in order for us to make traction and to start healing our soul, we have to pay attention to what our body is telling us and the flags and the signals that it is communicating with us. And so I think that that's kind of a first step of, okay, are any of these patterns happening? Is that the right word? Yeah, like, what is my body trying to communicate with me? And then where do I move from that? And then even like you said in your story of recognizing that, and this was something I had never heard either, that our family of origin does play a really big part in our life. And in my journey with healing and counseling, I had to go back. And that's why a lot of times I ask my guests, go back to your 10-year-old self and like, what advice would you give? I had to go back because a lot of the work I needed to start doing, I had to go back to that 10-year-old girl and talk to her, because even as a 40-ish-year-old woman, I was still holding on to a lot of things that were unresolved that I had just pushed down, and that little 10-year-old girl was still holding on to.
Yeah.
But I think that was a new concept for me. I'd never actually allowed myself and given myself freedom to go back and unwind and untangle some of these narratives that were in my head. So talk a little bit more, Jess, just about what could that even mean? And obviously, this is work that really could be done individually, one-on-one, but maybe just some questions of, family of origin and what were some realizations that you had looking back?
Absolutely. Thanks for sharing that little bit about your 10-year-old. I would love to get to know 10-year-old Charisse more. I bet she's really fun.
She was much more fun than I am now. So we're working on bringing her out.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. A phrase I use really often with my clients is, can we be curious versus judgmental? Because even in that curiosity lens versus the judgmental lens, there is space given for those younger parts to come up. Because for so long, and for me and a lot of the clients I work with, there was so much judgment put on the younger parts, their feelings, their needs, their wants, their desires. And so that has been shoved down, and it's coming out all kinds of ways sideways.
Yeah.
Because it still lives in the body, and it's being displaced in usually unhealthy ways or unhealthy relationships.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so part of the process of even learning how to connect with those younger parts to allow some of that to come up is, can you play? That's one question I love to ask people. How do you play? And usually they're like, what are you talking about?
Right.
Play. I'm 40 years old. I don't play.
No, we don't. We don't play. Some of us have a hard time even asking. My friend Molly had said back in one of our previous episodes, Brittany asked her, like, what brings you joy? And she said, I don't know. I'm gonna have to sit with that for a moment.
Yeah.
So play, joy. Yes. Keep going. Keep going.
Yes. Because children learn through play. Like if you just sit with, I have a nephew who's 2 in a couple months. He turned 2 in March, and I got to spend some time with him a couple weekends ago. And yeah, he has, the attention span of a squirrel, but he is just, he's learning, he's playing, he is expressing. And then he gets really upset when playtime is over. And of course, oh my gosh, I'm upset when playtime's over. And so just even being able to validate to him, like, buddy, I'm so sad playtime is over. That is so hard. And let's be sad about it real quick. Let's make sure that your toys are here. We see them. We got to go take a bath. And I know it's not fun. I know. So let's be sad about it for a second. And I'm going to validate it. I'm going to attune to it. Mm-hmm. And because, your mom and your dad and I are the adults, we're going to go ahead and move on to the next thing. And then we'll come back. So even just watching a child play, they learn through play. And it's beautiful.
What does that look like just for an adult, though, when you ask us that question?
Yeah. So when I think of play, I think of how can we engage your senses? Like what does it look like? Because a lot of times play, I feel like as we get older, is more about competitiveness, competition. How can I beat the person in front of me? How can I climb the ladder? How can I make sure I'm good? Because if I'm good, then that means I'll probably be loved and accepted. And so play can be really hard for people because if I'm not good, then I'm not going to be accepted here, or I'm going to reject myself. And so even doing things, so for an adult, and I like to ask usually like, hey, what did you like to do as a kid? And usually people will have some kind of response. Oh, well, I like to go outside and make flower crowns, or I liked to play with, toy animals. I liked to shoot hoops with my neighbor, or get sidewalk chalk. Sidewalk chalk is one of my favorites to tell adults because it's like not super defined. You can't make it super straight edge. It's just messy.
It is messy.
But so, you're engaging with your hands. It's tactile. It's probably going to get on your hands.
Mm.
You usually got to sit on the ground, which can be very childlike, not childish, but childlike. I think the Lord does a really good job of describing childlike spirit versus a childish spirit. And how he calls us in our childlike spirit. So, and it's visual. Kids are very visual for the most part. And so to be able to see something, to touch something, to be outside, you're going to hear something.
Mm-hmm.
You might smell something, just something that's going to engage the senses in a very different way.
Mm-hmm.
So if people are, crafty, usually I'm like, okay, let's get some sidewalk chalk. Let's get some paints. Let's get, me, not crafty at all. I love it. I'm not good at it. So for me, like, I'm going to get a paint by number. I'm going to get a puzzle because at least I have some kind of like structure.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to get a stencil. Going to play pickleball if you love sports as a kid, like trying something new and being willing to be curious versus judgmental. So some of that makes sense.
Yeah. And that's such a great question in any sense, as we're like walking through noticing emotions, noticing what's going on in our body. We're just noticing. We're just like,
interesting.
That's cool. I've never noticed that before, right?
Yes, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. So paying attention to things our body is telling us, paying attention to how do we have fun?
Yes.
And are we giving ourselves that freedom to experience joy, to delight, to play?
Yes.
Yeah. And not perform. Play and not perform.
Yes, absolutely. Which is very challenging. So again, it comes back to that idea of creating the new trail, the new hiking trail.
Mm-hmm.
I'll use the example of using chalk outside. As soon as you sit down, you might be like, this is so silly. I can't believe I'm doing this. So that's that judgment voice coming in.
Okay.
And so we can have some awareness and then we can have attention to it. I'm going to bring some attention to it and maybe name like, okay, this feels like my inner critic who's judging me, who used to keep me safe because I had to perform to get love as a kid or as an adolescent or as a young 20, 30-year-old woman, man. And now I don't need her to be or him to be as loud. So I'm going to ask them to take a step aside. I'm going to attune to you. I'm going to give you some attention. And then I'm going to have intention of what I do next. So I'm going to ask you to step aside. I'm going to imagine you moving over into the passenger seat. And adult me is going to keep doing the sidewalk chalk.
Like such a place of freedom to be able to just say, to recognize that, like, you know what, you're not going to have control anymore.
Yeah.
We're going to move into this phase of life.
Yes.
And so learning how to do that.
Yes. And this is the tricky part too, not even trying your best not to judge the judgmental parts, if that makes sense. So even part of it is honoring them, like honoring these parts of you that have kept you safe or protected you and being able to ask them like, hey, thanks for your, I like to think someone in the, like, how do I want to say this? Like someone in the military, they come home from service and you're like, okay, bye. See you later. I don't need you anymore. It's like, no, I want to honor you for your service. Like I want to honor these protective parts of me that have kept me safe, even if they've been harmful to me as an adult. They kept me safe as a kid and I no longer need them right now.
That's so powerful, Jess, because the first thing I would want to do is be like, I don't need you anymore. But you're right. Right. That's still a part of our body, a part of our story, but it's just not necessary right now.
Yes.
Yes. And so is that what you explain a little bit? You talked and touched on disassociation. Is that the same? Is that anything like that?
So dissociation, I think our parts, the parts of us that get really big and try to protect us from either feelings or emotions or experiences, it is a way to disconnect from what is actually going on emotionally.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Kinda.
I'm just
Yeah.
wrapping my brain around all of it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So dissociation looks like detachment. And so again, someone can be very high functioning. They might, again, run a business, have 2 kids, have a beautiful home, um, and have all the things, but there's detachment from themselves. So detachment from their inner world, which is their feelings, their thoughts, their needs, their wants, their longings and desires.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's this, I am dissociated from this part of me that is actually my identity. Because my identity and my personhood might look like it's all these things
Mm-hmm.
because I've put my identity in that, but really I have lost me.
Mm.
And so I am dissociated from me and what's going on in here.
Wow. Right. And we talked about that yesterday about your inner world and your outer world. So like your outer world is that public world like you just talked about, and then your inner world is that. So
Mm-hmm.
how do we how do we pull them together? Or do you pull them together so
Yeah.
that that inner world can be healed and so that we can all be coming from a place of wholeness?
Yeah. The word I like to use is how do we make those congruent?
Okay.
Which means making them align and match up. So if it looks like everything is great on the outside, but I'm not fine, those are not congruent.
No.
At all. Like there can be times where like life looks fine and I'm not okay and there be truth around that and we can talk about that. But if it's the opposite of I'm just not telling my truth, those are not congruent,
Mm-hmm.
if
Mm-hmm.
that makes sense.
Yes. Yes.
And so it comes back to that idea of let's bring some awareness to it.
Okay.
Let's bring attention to it and intention of how we want to do that. And usually that's going to look really slow. Because if I were just to tell someone, okay, well, I just want you to get rid of all of these coping mechanisms that you've used. I want you to quit your job. I want you to just let your house be a wreck. Like people would be like, okay, I'm never coming back to you again. I can't do any of that. But if it's like, okay, let's just go really slow.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like, what if you do 3 minutes a day where you sit down, you look at this feelings chart, you do like 3 minutes of breath work, and then you write down what you're feeling in your body. And that's it.
We could do that. We can do that.
Once a day.
Okay.
So, and 3 minutes of breathing, when you actually do it, is actually really long. So sometimes I'll say, do it for 30 seconds. Literally just, if you can, if it feels safe, close your eyes, put a hand on your heart, a hand on your stomach, even set a timer if you need to. And I just want you to breathe. Just for 30 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
And write down 1, 2, 3 words that came up when you did that. And they might be uncomfortable, might be tight, or it might be, I felt safe. I feel grounded. I can breathe. I didn't even know I was breathing.
Yeah.
So just starting with something slow of how do I slow down and tune in?
Which almost feels like a luxury, Jess.
Yeah.
Yes. So the question that I've been trying to learn this same thing too, because my inner voice will say, this is such a waste of time. This is not productive.
Mm-hmm.
And trying to calm that chatter and to say, this is good. This is necessary. Yeah. This is healing. Is that okay to be saying those while we're kind of in that moment, just to quiet our soul?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And I tell people this too. You might start trying to slow down and tune in. And those voices, they're going to come up.
Mm-hmm.
They just do.
Yeah.
they go back to that automatic and autonomic response of, what are you doing? This isn't productive. This is a waste of time. You have 15 things on your to-do list and you're going to sit here and breathe. Girl, we can breathe when we do all those things,
Right. I try to picture, and tell us if this is a good thing. I learned this at one of the silent retreats, that when we are quieting ourselves and just giving ourselves that moment to kind of slow down, when those thoughts come, I just kind of picture Jesus as a shepherd, because he is our good shepherd, like with that staff that just takes those thoughts and he just so gently says, come on back, come on back, just very gently and lovingly. It's okay. Like, I know your mind wandered, Therese. That's okay. Come on back.
Yes.
Is that, yeah?
Absolutely. And, in Psalm 23, like, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He asked me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me by still waters. Like, and he will do that over and over and over again. Regardless of how we show up, because it's not what we do. It's what he does.
Yeah.
We just have to be willing to show up and ask for help. Like, that is another really big part of all of this. Is asking for help, because we haven't really touched on that piece, because, again, I always tell people, if you think about it, when babies are born, they are helpless. They cannot feed. They can't walk. They can't talk. Sometimes they need help even just going to the bathroom. Like, they are not, they are helpless for the most part. They need another nervous system, meaning another body, to help them. And as we age, we become more, we have more ability to take care of ourselves. We become more self-sufficient. And if you even notice, like a 2-3-year-old, even the 1-year-old will start to wander away from mom because they're learning healthy separation. But they're still going to turn around and say, oh, are you still there? While I crawl over to this toy, are you still there? And we ask that as adults, are you still there? Like, will you still help me? And so asking for help in the midst of all of it is a huge part of the process, because as humans, we are not created to do this life alone.
No.
Even Jesus had 12 disciples.
Yes.
Like,
yes. Yeah.
Like, and sure, he's fully God as well as fully man. He could have done it alone, but he chose not to.
Right.
And I think that was an example of us as fully human. We can't do it alone.
No. And we weren't designed to be self-sufficient. That is why when we are working in it from a place of thinking, I got all this, I can do all this myself, that's why we do end up coming to the end of ourselves. Because we cannot. And so giving ourselves that grace to say, I can reach up for help. I can reach up to a friend. I can reach up to a professional that knows how to guide me, knows how to almost blaze that trail and cut that path forward for me, so that I'm not walking this alone. I have somebody next to me.
Yes. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, Jess, if this is new for some of our friends that are listening, if this is, some of this terminology is new, they've never heard it before, or if they're saying, wow, my body has been talking to me, but I haven't really been listening. Do you think that first, like, what would be the first 2 or 3 things that you could share with them about how to really start cutting in that new groove? And I know we've touched on it, but maybe just to kind of review.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, the 3 words that I like to use are awareness, attention, and intention.
Okay.
Awareness, attention to it. So just even awareness of the body, of, oh, I have a body that's below my shoulders. And it might have feelings. Attention, bringing some attention to it of, okay, yeah, I notice I have this flutter in my chest. or this pit in my stomach. And then intention of, hey, how do I want to care for my body? And so just tangible ways is we're going to do here close to the end, we'll do a body scan I'll give you all that to take with you. And breath work is great. Some kind of yoga or meditation, anything that is slowing down and not going faster. One of the things we did at the retreat house that I love to encourage people to do is to do a mindful walk. And so what that looks like is take your shoes off if you feel comfortable doing that. Go out in your backyard first thing in the morning and just walk barefoot. Notice what you feel under your feet. Notice what you hear, because there will probably be birds singing. Notice what you feel if the wind's on your face or if you're kind of hot because it is summer in Memphis. And just be for, again, 2 to 3 minutes. Just notice, not judging, just notice.
Mm-hmm. And maybe even first, before we pick up our phones or look at our phones.
Absolutely.
That's been a practice I've been hearing about this week. Like, don't touch your phone to look at what time it is. Just get up and get in front of the sunshine. Go get outside, right? First.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And first thing in the morning if you can.
Mm-hmm.
If you're like me and you have to start your coffee pot before you go out there, I get it. I'm in that boat too. And if you can, going out there first thing in the morning. I have my dog, so I bring my dog with me. Even just to pet my dog in the morning outside is very soothing to me because it's another nervous system, because my dog has a nervous system that is regulating to mine, which means it helps mine calm down. It helps me regulate. So just to have something that can help my body slow down and tune in.
Perfect. I love it. Okay. Mindful walk and starting off slow versus waking up and feeling that rush of needing to go.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay.
Then your anxiety creeps up. Usually you're getting an adrenaline dump and it just starts the day really chaotic.
I love it. The mindful walk. And then even like you said earlier, the 30 seconds or 3 minutes of allowing ourselves to just breathe.
Yes.
Quietly and still before anything, the hustle and bustle of the day begins, to really, you're telling yourself, I'm saying this, but I'm asking you the question. You're telling yourself and you're telling your nervous system, you are safe. You can start this day, and just being able to start it slow.
Yes, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. Great. And then the last thing you said is the body scan. Yeah. And so what is that? How do we do that?
Yeah. So body scan, we're going to be bringing some awareness just to each part of our body. I'll lead us through this. Okay. And I'm not going to give a ton of like directives around it. We're just going to do it.
Okay, let's do it.
So for our listeners who are either watching or are listening, if you're not driving, maybe find a comfortable place that you can sit. If you're walking around your house doing chores, maybe just take a minute and let your body find somewhere it can rest. So wherever you are in your day, in your week, I'm just going to invite you to be curious with me over the next few minutes as we check in with what's going on in your body. And just start by finding a comfortable position. If you're sitting down, just let the couch or the chair hold you. Maybe lean back. Let your body sink in. And just start to notice your breath. Notice if it's short and choppy, or is it long and steady, or somewhere in between? Over the next few rounds of breath, I just want to invite you to extend the inhales and the exhales just a little bit longer. As you inhale, imagine your body taking up space because you can. And on the exhale, allowing your body to sink deeper and deeper into whatever is supporting you. On your next inhale, I want you to bring your awareness to your jaw. Noticing if there's tightness and maybe just allowing your jaw to relax. Slightly splitting the teeth and maybe even the lips fall open. And then let the awareness slide down into your shoulders, your neck, welcoming some softness and some gentleness. Letting the energy come down into your arms, your forearms, and your fingers. And then imagining the energy coming back up your forearms, tops of your arms, and coming into your back. Noticing the top of your back and your shoulder blades, your mid back, your low back. Noticing how, if you're seated, how they press against your couch or the floor, your chair. Bring some awareness to your diaphragm and your stomach. Your chest. Noticing how it rises and falls as you inhale and exhale. And then letting the awareness drift to your sits bones and your pelvis. To the tops of your legs, the bottoms of your legs, your knees, your calves, and your feet, and your toes. Taking a moment to just pause and thank your body, specifically your feet, for carrying you day in and day out as you journey and travel throughout life. And then just letting the energy spread out through your body from the top of your head down to the tips of your toes. Taking a moment to pause and imagining this gentle breeze of gratitude flowing over each part of you. Just thanking each part of your beautiful body for getting you from place to place. And doing all the wonderful things it does without you even asking.